Finovate showcases cutting-edge banking and financial technology through a global conference series featuring short-form demos and thought leadership. Now, the conversation continues on the Finovate podcast.
Hi, everybody. Greg Palmer welcoming you to the Finovate podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about cannabis banking, and we've got two amazing guests for you. I've got Stacy Litke, the VP of Banking Services at Green Check, and joining her, we have Megan Bennett, the Manager of Marijuana-Related Business at Wright-Patt Credit Union. Thank you both so much for taking the time to connect with me today.
Absolutely. Hi. Thanks for having us.
Perfect. So I'd like to have you each start just by introducing yourselves, telling a little bit about your background and the companies that you're working at. Megan, I'll start with you.
Awesome. Like Greg said, I'm Megan Bennett. I am the Marijuana Compliance Manager at Wright-Patt Credit Union. I have been in the banking industry for over 10 years. And the last 7 of those, I have specialized in cannabis banking. Important to note, Wright-Patt Credit Union was the first financial institution in Ohio to offer banking services. Somewhere in the 2017-2018 timeframe, the state approached us to see if we were interested, and we decided that offering banking services to the cannabis businesses in the state was the best option for us to keep our community safe and provide for underbanked businesses. And that's kind of how we got into the space and where I started all of this fun cannabis business banking.
Yeah, that's great. And we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about the decision behind it. But before we do, I'd like Stacy, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me, Greg. A little bit about me. I've spent the last 40 years working at the intersection of banking and technology. And as you said, I'm currently serving as the VP of Banking Services at Green Check. Over the course of my career, I've had the opportunity to participate in the transformation of this industry, which has been pretty exciting along the way. But about 5 years ago, I was looking for a new challenge. And one of my passions is herbalism and plant medicine. So I started looking at how I could combine that passion with my banking and technology skills. Literally Googled plant medicine, banking and technology, and found Green Check. And I've been here for about 5 years now. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Excellent. No, that's great. I love the kind of natural inquisitiveness that led you into where you are now. Before we go too far, I just want to quickly talk about the relationship between you. How would you guys describe the relationship between Green Check and Wright-Patt?
Fantastic.
Yes.
Wright-Patt is one of our favorite clients. Megan works very closely with us, and her team is part of their innovation council. But we provide the technology that helps them run their program efficiently. And Megan, I think you probably have more to add to that.
Yeah, like Stacy said, we have an awesome partnership. It's super refreshing and super nice to work with a business who wants to work with you. That makes a huge difference. And I can feel that they enjoy working with us and they want our insight. And that just makes such a huge difference in that partnership.
Yeah, that's great. And we'll talk more about that side of things as well. I'd like to kick off the conversation at a really high level and talk about the challenges that financial institutions face when they're engaging with cannabis-related businesses. And I know there are many FIs who kind of think of this as something that they can't touch, that is too difficult or too scary to get involved with. Stacy, can you start by just talking about some of those challenges that they face and how big of an issue this disconnect is when it comes to kind of federal, state laws and the various complications there?
Yeah, the disconnect between the federal and state laws is the primary challenge, right? Because the activity that's occurring, the deposits, the sales activity can be considered criminal activity at the federal level, even though there are state laws legalizing either medical or adult use in a particular state. So back in 2014, FinCEN came out with guidance and said, as couple of states started legalizing, they said, look, financial institution, this is up to you to decide based on your risk tolerance, whether or not you want to support this industry. And if you're going to do that, here are the kind of the rules we want you to follow around that. And that guidance it's high level, it's outdated. We all wish that FinCEN would come forward with some clarity around what they're looking for. But that's the primary challenge, is because these rules have been set forth around enhanced due diligence and red flags for law enforcement priorities, things that the agencies want to know about, the ongoing continuing SARs every 90 days, which is very different than normal SARs where you file them when you see the one thing or the two things that make you suspicious about an account. You have to file these every 90 days, no matter what, even if the cannabis operator is not doing anything nefarious and they're just doing their normal banking. So there's a little bit of overhead around that, which is additional overhead for the financial institution, which translates into additional overhead for the cannabis business. So there are some operational challenges. And if I'm being honest, there are some institutions that struggle with this from a reputation and moral perspective, right? Like this is something we all grew up with thinking about as we don't want this activity in our institution. We need to exit these accounts. We don't want to do business with criminals. And the switch in thinking to these aren't criminals. This is state legal activity. These are businesses in our community. Sometimes that's a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the shift it is difficult to imagine when you start to think of something one way for your entire life to then think about it a different way. Megan, how about from your side? I'm curious to hear what your customers are facing when obviously there's a lot of different types of businesses that fall under this umbrella of marijuana related businesses. What are some of the challenges that they face in terms of just being able to run their business the way they want to?
Yeah, there are lots of different types of customers. So depending on, a financial institution's risk appetite will depend on what types of customers they're banking. So for us, we have around 100 or so different customers, and we offer services for direct and indirect. So the direct businesses are the plant touching, so those cultivators, processors, dispensaries. And then the indirect are all of the businesses that support those plant touching businesses. So that would be like a service provider, a payroll, investment company, management company, all of those different types. So we offer banking to all of those different members. So for our businesses specifically, it is difficult for them because they really just want to be treated like a regular business. They want to have the same access to the same resources that all other businesses have. And many times that's just not always an option. So at Wright-Patt Credit Union, we do our best to make banking easy for our members, and we try to ensure a smooth experience. We're always working on that balance, right, between the risk of banking this industry and offering a good member experience. And one of those things that Stacy kind of also hit on was like the knowledge of the industry. That's one of the challenges that I think affects both the business and the financial institution, because in order to bank this industry, you really have to understand. So we go out and we engage our members and we ask them, hey, what are you facing? What are your challenges? How do you run your business? How do you do this? How do you do that? Show us what it's like to grow this, to process it. And we learn from them so that we can then turn around and give them a better banking experience and help them with their business. And again, it's a kind of like a partnership. We're not just offering them banking services. We kind of look at that also as a partnership, because if we're not doing our research and we're not gaining knowledge in this industry, then there's going to be challenges that these businesses face and we have no idea. And then we're missing an opportunity to help them operate their legal business.
Yeah. And you hit on something there that I think we should dig into a little bit more, because there is a massive opportunity here, right? The cannabis industry is certainly growing. There's been a significant growth curve across the United States, which generally means that there's an opportunity for FIs that are able to engage with them. Can you talk a little bit more about the size of that opportunity and what you've seen on the Wright-Patt side in terms of how many businesses you're able to work with and what that's done for you as an FI?
So I feel like cannabis and risk appetite just kind of go together. It's like, it's my buzzword. But I really feel like the size of the opportunity for a financial institution is fully based on that risk appetite and their comfortability. So some financial institutions like Wright-Patt Credit Union, we focus specifically on Ohio. So we want to provide banking services for all the cannabis businesses in Ohio, and that is our goal. There's other financial institutions that are willing to bank out of state. There's some that only want to bank the indirect, maybe less risky businesses. There's some that lend, some that don't lend. So there's truly a full spectrum of opportunities available, and it's all dependent on what your financial institution's mission and vision is. So again, we choose to bank Ohio because that's what our mission and our vision is. We are rooted in community and taking care of our members here. So, I mean, the opportunity is truly, it can be whatever you want it to be. The size is whatever the financial institution wants out of it and whatever their risk appetite is going to allow. It's such a huge spectrum of opportunity.
Stacy, anything you'd add? I mean, obviously you guys are active in a lot of other states as well. So you have maybe a little bit more of a high level view in terms of the opportunity. Anything you'd like to chime in there?
Yeah, I think this is legitimate in an industry that the banking industry needs to recognize. I mean, there's just under 50,000 licensed operators across the country, and that number continues to grow as new states come online. They have landed around $30 billion in sales last year. In addition to those licensed direct operators, there's also another 110, 115,000 indirect businesses who have either started specifically to support the industry or expanded their lines of business into the cannabis space. And those folks have challenges with banking as well. So there's this legitimate nationwide industry that, depending on how the federal government moves over the next year or two, could translate into a very large interstate commerce opportunity. We've got a lot of institutions that are getting comfortable around the lending space here. There's a debt cliff coming due, businesses that have been out there for a number of years. I mean, Megan mentioned, Ohio's been legal for 10 years. Those businesses have been operating. They've borrowed. They have had to borrow most likely from alternative lenders at very high rates. So they are proven entities that now need to refinance this debt. According to the Whitney Economic Report, there's like $65 billion in debt opportunity over the next few years for financial institutions to come in and take out these higher price loans and help businesses expand as they move into new states and new markets. So there's a huge opportunity for the financial services space, and it really has been legitimatized as an industry. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. I mean, public outcry at this point would be pretty substantial. If there was any significant change, you would have to imagine. So let's talk about Green Check specifically and what you all are able to do that helps financial institutions like Wright-Patt find that opportunity while avoiding those potential sources of risk.
Well, we approach this from a couple different directions. With institutions that are kind of at the beginning of the process, beginning of their journey, we walk them through understanding what is the journey, what are the things they need to think about and prepare for, like having examiner conversations, getting board approval, the education piece. They need to understand the operational requirements of working in this space. So we kind of walk them through building a program and getting ready to make the decision on whether or not they want to work with this industry. So that's the first half of it. And then once they make that decision to move forward, or in the case of Wright-Patt, who already had a program in place when we started working with them, how do we help them launch a program and manage it in an efficient way using the data and the technology that we have? So our software program was built around solving those problems for the financial institutions that wanted to work in this space. And the biggest thing that we encountered right off the bat was that the financial institution has to have demonstrable proof that the money coming into the financial institution is the result of state legal sales. So how do you do that? Part of that process is collecting sales data from the operators so that you can match up their invoices or their point of sale records to the money coming in to say deposits and sales are in alignment. And there's not like an extra chunk of cash coming in from illicit activity. So where Green Check first started was solving that problem around integrating our system into the sales systems of the cannabis operators and pulling that information in an automated fashion and aligning it with the deposit data so that the financial institution could see in one spot, I have 500,000 in sales and I have $450,000 in deposits, and that looks good. But beyond that, we also wanted to show that these were legal transactions. So we codified the state regulatory rules for each cannabis market into our system. So as those transactions are coming in at the dispensary level, we're actually checking it against the regulatory rules for that state. So we're making sure that the purchaser presented an ID at the time they purchased and are of age. We check to see that the products are legal in that state. For example, some states won't allow gummies or botanical flower. They have restrictions on that. So if those products are sold, we're going to flag that as it's out of compliance. Some states have limits on the THC levels or the grams that can be sold in any one purchase. Again, we're tracking all of that and we're flagging those transactions as out of compliance so that the financial institution has a really good handle on how compliance minded is their customer. And when they go and file those reports in SARS, are they giving a report that the operator is doing good and following the rules and is a legal state entity, or do they have some red flag behavior that needs to be addressed? And from that sales part, we kind of expanded beyond that to what else can we do to gain some efficiencies? We created automated account monitoring reviews that pull all the data together and create the analysis for the FI. We worked on FinCEN, CTR, SAR filing modules. We have created program management dashboards for the business development team to be able to manage the relationship. So there's all sorts of things that we've been adding into the platform to really leverage that data to help them manage their programs.
Yeah, and I mean, that's excellent. When you think about all those different moving pieces and how many different hoops you have to jump through, you get a real scope of the size of the challenge. I want to talk about other types of high-risk businesses, and we only have a limited amount of time left, so this will have to be relatively quick, but I think it is worth making the connection because cannabis is obviously its own animal when it comes to banking, but there are other types of banking transactions or FIs that engage in what could be perceived as high-risk types of financial services. Are there any connections you can make between what the types of things you have to do in the cannabis industry versus other industries that banks might already be engaging in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anywhere where there is enhanced due diligence, where you're collecting documentation like you do for cannabis or ongoing or industry-specific monitoring, tools like Green Check can be leveraged to make those processes a little easier. And if you have the risk tolerance to work in cannabis, you would have the risk tolerance to work with casinos or money service bureaus and vice versa, right? Like if you're already working with high risk industries, moving into the cannabis space is not that far of a stretch.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things where, again, we have this perception of it because it's been societally something that we were growing up with, a different view of it that you think, well, there's always been casinos, but cannabis has only been legal for a short time. So maybe that's more risky, but that might not necessarily be the case. I'd like to close by just, Megan, asking for you to talk at a higher level about credit union fintech partnerships more broadly and sort of what you look for when you engage with a fintech, what advice you have for other credit unions who are looking to find the right partner for them. Any last words there?
Yeah. So I have this question asked a lot, actually, and I give all the people that I talk to, all the financial institutions, I give them the same advice, and it's always do your research. Be comfortable asking all the questions. Ask the hard questions. When I started the process of finding cannabis-specific fintech, I compared several platforms against each other. I demoed all of them numerous times. I asked all the questions, and it was a time frame. It was not a quick decision. It was a very educated decision that we made. And I think that's very important because you can't know everything about a business in the first demo. You need to do that additional research and really make a good decision for what your financial institution needs. I think it's also super important to discover what the actual partnership looks like after the implementation. Like we were talking about earlier, Green Check Verified and Wright-Patt Credit Union have a great partnership. We work super closely together, and it is super refreshing to just have another business who wants to work with you, who is interested in your views and your thoughts, and they want to make enhancements and they want your input. And that is just a huge difference between working with other systems who will implement and then they have no customer service. They have no interest in meeting with you. They have no interest in what your ideas are to enhance their system. And it's a huge difference between those two types of partnerships. And it definitely makes a big difference in how we use the platform and what we can do in the platform to make it work for us. So that how that partnership works after the fact and knowing the people at the company and what happens is a huge, crucial first step for anybody who's looking into finding a fintech.
Yeah, it's really good advice. And obviously you have both been able to find success. It's clear from the conversations we had before the call, before this recording, and during this recording, you clearly have a very strong relationship with each other, which has allowed you to go out and grab some of this opportunity. I hope people listening have been able to take a couple things away in terms of how you could potentially engage with the space if it's something your FI wanted to do, or if you're on the fintech side looking for those opportunities where you are able to help out businesses that need a little bit of extra handholding because of regulatory concerns or things like that. We do have to leave the conversation there, but I thank you both again for taking the time. It was a really productive conversation. Again, Stacy Litke of Green Check, Megan Bennett of Wright-Patt Credit Union. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
Check out Finovate.com for information on Finovate's upcoming shows and to learn how you can get involved. The discount code Finovate Podcast will save you 20% on tickets to all of our events. And you can email us at info@finovate.com for information on sponsoring, speaking, or demoing. Thanks for listening.